Welcome back to the Deep Dive, listeners. Today we're diving into a pretty interesting market, one that might not be on everyone's radar, but it's definitely worth exploring. We're talking vinyl cell phone.
Yeah, vinyl sulfone. Not exactly a household name, maybe, but this stuff is crucial in all sorts of industries, and we're going to break down why it matters, where it's going, and what's driving its growth.
Exactly. And we've got a comprehensive market report that takes us all the way to 2025 and beyond. Our mission today is to pull out the key insights, cut through all the data and highlight the trends you need to know. So think of this as your crash course on the vinyl cell phone market, basically.
Fast track to being in the know.
All right, so let's get right to it. By 2025, the global vinyl cell phone market is expected to reach a whopping USD 720 million. That's a big number. But it gets even more interesting because projections show it ballooning to almost USD 3 billion, USD 2,969.00 million to be exact by 2033.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant jump, right?
It really is. We're talking about a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of 4.30% starting from 2025. So this market isn't just holding steady, it's gaining momentum.
It's a sign of consistent demand.
Yeah.
And that makes it super interesting if you're, say, tracking industrial chemicals or just want to understand global economic shifts. What's really cool here is digging into the specific things driving that demand, and this report gets in all of that.
It does, and it also does a great job of breaking down that demand geographically. So it's not just about how vinyl sulfone is being used, but also where in the world that usage is most concentrated. Now, for those of you who want to really dig into the numbers yourselves, the report is available in all sorts of formats: PDFs, Excel sheets for all you number crunchers out there, and even PowerPoint presentations.
Oh, and I should mention it's constantly being updated, which is really important in a market like this that's moving so quickly.
Okay, so let's get a picture of the global market, region by region. Looking at 2025, North America is expected to be the biggest player, holding over 40% of the global market share. That translates to a market size of USD 784.40 million.
So a solid lead right out the gate.
Yeah. But their projected growth is, well, it's more moderate compared to other regions. We're looking at a CAGR of 2.8% between 2025 and 2033.
Right, that kind of suggests a well-established market in North America. Industries using vinyl sulfone are already pretty mature there, so the growth is steady, but other parts of the world are poised for much faster expansion.
And that brings us to Europe. They're anticipated to be the second largest region with over 30% of the global share, which is a market size of USD 614.80 million in 2025.
Not too far behind North America, at least for now.
Right. And their CAGR is a bit stronger at 3.4%, which probably reflects continued demand across Europe's diverse industrial landscape. Everything from textiles to like a wide range of chemical applications.
It makes you wonder, though, how Europe's focus on, sustainability, being eco-friendly, all that, how that might play into the vinyl sulfone market there. Could even create opportunities for some cool, innovative green uses of vinyl sulfone, maybe.
That's a great point. Now, get ready for this. The Asia-Pacific region, APAC for short, is expected to be the real growth story here. In 2025, they're projected to hold around 23% of the global share, with a market size of USD 508.80 million. But hold on, because their CAGR is a whopping 7.0% from 2025 to 2033. That's huge.
7%, that is definitely something to pay attention to. Clearly shows a rapidly increasing demand in APAC, likely driven by, expanding industrial production and growing consumption across the board, really.
It seems like if you're looking at the future of this market, APAC is the place to watch. All right, quickly touching on the other regions, we've got South America projected at over 5% of the global market with a CGR of 5%.
Solid growth.
The Middle East is a bit surprising. They're only around 2% of the global share, but they have a slightly larger market size than South America in 2025.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good reminder that market share isn't everything. Sometimes looking at the actual numbers tells a different story.
Absolutely. And finally, Africa is expected to account for about 1% of global revenue with a CAGR of 4.6%. So we've got this global picture. Now let's talk about how vinyl sulfone is actually being used. The report segments the industry by application, and initially it highlights the interventional category as the fastest growing segment. Can you clarify what interventional means in this context?
Sure. So basically, interventional applications of vinyl sulfone mean it's used as a building block to create other, more complex chemical compounds, like a key ingredient in chemical synthesis. So seeing this segment as the fastest growing, it tells us there's a big increase in demand for vinyl sulfone as a crucial raw material for making all sorts of other chemicals.
Okay, so it's being used to actively intervene in creating other substances, but then the report gets a little nuanced. When it analyzes the market by study design, it says the observational segment is actually the fastest growing. That seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it?
Yeah, I see what you mean. So in market analysis and observational study design is basically research that looks at existing market data and trends without, actually trying to influence the market. It's about analyzing what's already happening.
Gotcha.
So the fact that this observational segment is growing so fast probably means there's a huge need to understand this vinyl sulfone market, especially as it grows. So yeah, while interventional is about using the chemical, observational is about analyzing the market. Two sides of the same coin, in a way.
That makes sense. It's about how much the product is being used versus how much people are studying the market. Okay, so let's zoom in on some regional specifics. We already mentioned North America has the biggest market share, and most of that comes from the US. They're projected at USD 618.89 million in 2025, with a CAGR of 2.6%. What's behind that demand in the US?
Well, the report points to two main things. First, there's an increasing need for high-performance adhesives, the really strong ones. And second, a growing demand for ion exchange resins, which are used in a lot of industrial processes.
Gotcha. Then we have Canada at USD 94.13 million, with a slightly higher 2GR of 3.6%. The report highlights their strong automotive industry as a big factor there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Modern cars use tons of advanced adhesives for all sorts of parts, and vinyl sulfone is probably a key ingredient in a lot of those adhesives.
Makes sense. Rounding out North America, we've got Mexico projected at USD 71.38 million with a CAGR of 3.3%. The report mentions the presence of some big players in the industry there, as well as the growth in online clothing purchases and the resulting demand for organic chemicals used in clothing. And it specifically says the US is a major user of vinyl sulfone dyes because of its huge textile industry. It's interesting how interconnected everything is.
It really is. It shows how even things like online shopping can affect demand for a chemical like vinyl sulfone. Oh, and the report does mention some challenges in North America, like strict environmental regulations and, production costs. But they're also making technological progress, which helps to balance things out.
All right, let's jump across the Atlantic to Europe. Their overall market is projected at USD 614.8 million in 2025, with a CAGR of 3.4%. And one thing the report really emphasizes is Europe's focus on sustainability, being environmentally conscious. Germany, France, and the UK are leading the way there.
Yeah, that focus on green chemistry is definitely a big deal in Europe, and it's not surprising that Germany is leading the pack. They've got a huge chemical and textile industry. The report projects them at USD 121.73 million with a 3.6% CAGR.
Makes sense. What about the UK?
They're USD 103.29 million with a 4.2% CAGR. And yeah, their history in textiles, especially their reputation for high-quality dyes, is probably playing a role there. We also see Russia with a pretty big market size, USD 95.29 million, but their CAGR is a little lower at 2.4%.
And then Italy and Spain are both around USD 50 million, with CAGRs of 2.8% and 2.5%, respectively. It's cool that even smaller markets like Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, even Luxembourg are showing pretty decent growth, all between 3% and 3.7%. Shows that the demand for vinyl sulfone is pretty widespread.
Definitely. And the report specifically mentions EU regulations encouraging the use of bio-based vinyl sulfone dyes, which ties back to that whole sustainability thing we were talking about.
Right. Okay, enough about Europe because now it's time for the real star of the show, Asia Pacific. We already mentioned their impressive 7% CAGR. They're at USD 508.80 million in 2025. And China's leading the way there with a market size of USD 213.70 million and a CAGR of 6.5%. Why is China such a big player?
Well, for one, they're the biggest textile producer and exporter in the world, and their domestic chemical sector is also expanding rapidly. So when you think about the sheer volume of textile manufacturing they do, it's no wonder they need so much vinyl sulfone for dyes and other chemicals.
Wow, so what about other countries in APAC?
Well, Japan and South Korea are pretty big too, at USD 70.21 million and USD 61.06 million respectively, with CAGRs in the 5.5% to 6.1% range. But India is the one to watch. They've got the highest CAGR in APAC at a crazy 8.9%, with a 2025 market size of USD 50.88 million. That's some serious growth.
It's pretty remarkable. What's driving that in India?
Couple of things. Their textile industry is booming, and they're increasingly focused on using eco-friendly dyes. And we're also seeing strong growth across other parts of APAC like Australia, Singapore, Taiwan, and Southeast Asia, all with CAGRs above 6%. It's just a region on the rise.
So this report really highlights the booming textile industry in places like Bangladesh, India, and China as a major factor in APAC's growth, along with rapid industrialization and urbanization, which naturally leads to greater demand for things like high-performance dyes and other vinyl sulfone applications.
Yeah, you've got a dominant textile sector that's still growing, plus increased industrial activity across all these different countries. APAC is definitely where it's at in terms of vinyl sulfone market expansion in the coming years.
All right, on to South America. They're at USD 80.56 million in 2025 with a KGR of 5%. Brazil holds the largest share there at USD 34.48 million and a CGR 5.6%, which the report links to, guess what, their substantial textile industry.
Sounds familiar, right?
Yeah, definitely a recurring theme. We're also seeing Argentina, Colombia, Peru, and Chile with market sizes ranging from USD 5 to 13 million and CGRs between 4% and 6%. So steady growth, but not as explosive as APAC.
And what's interesting about South America is that they're not just using vinyl sulfone for textile dyes. They're also using it for adhesives, coatings for packaging, electronic components, and construction materials. All these sectors are growing, and they're driving the demand for vinyl sulfone in those applications.
Okay, next up is the Middle East. Their market is projected at USD 84.80 million in 2025 with a CGR of 5.6%. Saudi Arabia is the biggest player there at USD 29.85 million and a CGR of 5.9%. They're followed by the USD 17.47 million and a TGR of 6.1%. And then we've got Turkey and Qatar with similar market sizes around USD 6.78 million, but slightly different KGR.
Turkey's got a large textile industry, so that's likely a big factor in their growth, and Qatar's textile sector is also on the rise. It's interesting to see how, even in a region like the Middle East, textile manufacturing is still a significant driver.
Yeah, it really is. So what else is fueling growth in the Middle East?
Well, they've got a lot of infrastructure development going on, which is
Yeah.
increasing demand for coatings and construction materials, right? Plus, their automotive and aerospace industries are evolving, which probably creates new needs for vinyl sulfone. Oh, and the report also mentions the growing need for water treatment solutions in the region, which is boosting demand for ion exchange resins. Remember those? They often use vinyl sulfone in their production.
Yeah, they keep popping up everywhere. All right, last but not least, we've got Africa. Their market is projected at USD 46.64 million in 2025 with a key AGR of 4.6%. South Africa is the biggest player there at USD 16.42 million with a 5.73 million, but with a slightly higher CAGR of 4.8%. The report says this is due to rising demand for high-performance adhesives. Seems like adhesives are a big deal across multiple regions.
Yeah, they're definitely a major use for vinyl sulfone globally. And the report points to the increasing demand for textiles and consumer goods in Africa, as well as the expansion of their chemical and pharmaceutical industries, as factors contributing to their growth. Even though their overall market size is smaller compared to other regions, they're still seeing progress.
So we've covered the regional breakdown, but what are the big global trends that are driving the entire vinyl sulfone market? The report identifies a few key drivers, and we've touched on some of them already. The increasing demand for those high-performance adhesives, the growing need for ion exchange resins, and a rising demand for printed circuit boards, which are basically the brains of all our electronics.
And all of these are major industries that are growing themselves. They all need materials with specific properties, and vinyl sulfone happens to have those properties. Like in electronics, they're trying to make everything smaller and smaller, which means they need more advanced materials for their printed circuit boards. And in manufacturing, there's always a need for stronger, more durable adhesives. And then you've got water purity, which is a growing concern. So the demand for ion exchange resins keeps going up. It all ties together.
But of course, it's not all smooth sailing. The report also mentions some challenges, mainly the high cost of vinyl sulfone and, some environmental concerns related to its production and use.
Yeah, those are important considerations. Cost is always a factor, especially in markets that are more sensitive to price. And as environmental regulations get stricter and people become more aware of the impact of chemicals, those concerns are going to be a big deal for the future of the market. I think that's why we're seeing so much investment in R&D, trying to find more environmentally friendly alternatives.
Right. And speaking of the future, the report highlights some key trends to watch. The growing demand for those printed circuit boards, because the electronics industry isn't slowing down anytime soon, and the continued use of high-performance adhesives in just about everything, from cars to construction to packaging. It seems like vinyl sulfone is here to stay.
Yeah, it does. These trends really show how the vinyl sulfone market is connected to all these bigger technological advancements. As industries continue to evolve, they'll need what vinyl sulfone offers, and that will keep driving demand.
Okay, let's talk competition. The vinyl sulfone market seems to be pretty consolidated, with just a few major manufacturers dominating the scene. The report mentions that these companies are investing heavily in R&D, particularly in developing more sustainable products, and they're also using mergers and acquisitions to grow their market presence and, add more products to their portfolio.
Yeah, the report gives some good examples of this, like HIG Capital acquiring Avient Core in 2022, and Merck Millipore Sigma making a big investment in vinyl sulfone production that same year. It definitely shows that competition is heating up, and companies are trying to stay ahead of the game.
Makes sense. Finally, let's dig into some of the nuances in the market segmentation. We talked about how interventional applications were initially identified as the fastest growing overall, but then the observational segment, which is all about market analysis, takes the lead when looking at growth by study design.
Right, that's a key distinction. It's about the difference between using the product and analyzing the market for the product. Both are important, but they show different things about the market's dynamics.
Exactly. And then when you look at the indication segment, oncology holds the largest share right now, probably because vinyl sulfone is used in some cancer therapies. But the cardiovascular segment is growing really fast, with research looking into its potential anti-inflammatory properties. Although the report does say that more research is needed in that area.
Those little details give us even more insight into how vinyl sulfone is being used, especially in the pharmaceutical world. Oncology being dominant right now makes sense, but that rapid growth in the cardiovascular segment could mean big things for the future of vinyl sulfone in medicine.
So there you have it. We've gone through this entire vinyl sulfone market report, and hopefully we've given you, the listener, a good understanding of what's happening in this market. The key takeaways are that this is a global market worth billions of dollars, and it's expected to keep growing steadily through 2033. The demand for vinyl sulfone is coming from all sorts of industries, from textiles to adhesives to electronics, and different regions are growing at different rates, with APAC really leading the charge.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating is how this seemingly niche chemical market is so deeply connected to all these major global industries and economic trends. This report is a great snapshot of where the market is now and where it could be heading.
And here's a final thought to leave you with. Given that this market is projected to grow so much, can the industry keep up with the environmental concerns surrounding vinyl sulfone? Will all this research into bio-based alternative and more sustainable production be enough to meet the rising demand while minimizing the environmental impact? It's a complex question, but it's one that's going to shape the future of this market. Definitely something worth thinking about as global industries continue to evolve.
Yeah, that balance between economic growth and environmental responsibility is something we see in a lot of industries, and the vinyl sulfone market is no exception. Understanding how that balance plays out will be crucial in figuring out the long-term future of this sector.